Although initially released in 2015, that's for a platform that I do not and did not own. So I have to take the 2018 Steam release date and talk about Yakuza 0, published and developed by Sega, sharing some thematic threads, if you will, with Shenmue, an earlier entry of theirs. Because both have a guy who has a serious plot to undertake, but he's quite happy to get sidetracked by random people giving you errands and spending hours in the arcade, wasting money that you really shouldn't. But aside from that, those similarities are very, very, surface level. Everything else is different. But I tried to play the original Yakuza way back when. I just couldn't get into it. Maybe the plot just didn't appeal, the gameplay didn't appeal, I really can't remember, it was way back. But over time, Humble has given away, with the monthly choice as it is called now, Yakuza 0, Kiwami, and Kiwami 2. So I was like, I should probably play these. I've got them. And again, like a lot of the final entries, I struggled to get into it and put it to one side. And I think I did that twice with this. But this time something clicked, and I just really enjoyed the ridiculousness and the seriousness, because there is a heavy plot here, or two interesting interwoven storylines. But like I say, you can also go and do random errands for people, which really enhances the world. As I said in Persona 3 FES, the idea of these social links makes a difference. It does sort of change the end of the game. Your interactions with people don't make a difference with that in this, but they feel just as important to do. You really get the texture of the world around you through these little side quests. But that's what I love about this. It marries the weirdness. You can spend hours in an arcade just on a UFO catcher trying to get a little Sparrow doll, you know the one, for a little girl, and then a different one, and then something else. You can do this over and over again, and somehow this time I really had a good knack for it. It didn't take me ages, but you could literally spend hours in there just because of one sub-story. It's not furthering the main plot at all. It'll just give you some cash. But that's an interesting deviation that this takes as well. Whilst in a lot of RPGs, because there are RPG elements, I would consider it to a degree that it's an action-adventure RPG, I think. I think that works. But you don't level up with XP, like you do in Kiwami, etc. You actually invest in yourself with money. But this is set in the 80s, in what's considered the bubble, where money was just thrown left, right and centre. It was a very expensive time. People were just buying everything and anything because they could. So I like the fact that they incorporated the real world elements of life at that time. That money got you everything. And if you want to get better at stuff, invest in yourself, literally. But the plot of this is really what kept me going. Well, unless I got a bit bored of it and decided to spend hours in an arcade. But the plot was very, very complex in places, but very wonderfully woven between the two protagonists. Because this does that. It does a deuteragonist system. You aren't just playing as Kiryu Kazuma. You're also playing as Majima Goro. And you have 2 chapters of one, 2 chapters of the other. And you're constantly doing this sort of swapping of the storylines. But you're both technically trying to do the same thing eventually. Whilst Kiryu's story starts out of you've been accused of killing someone. It's very much like the original Yakuza, actually. But you're accused of killing someone, so you have to leave the Yakuza so you can investigate it. And investigate it you do, and suddenly you're taken in by this real estate guy who tells you about this plot of land, and that's what everyone's after. If the Dojima family can get hold of this, they can control all of this area, which is a fictionalized version of a real-life place. It's called Kamurocho in the game, but it's actually based on Kabukicho in actual Japan. Similarly, with Majima's story, that's set in Sotenbori, but it's actually based on Dotonbori. And I'm doing my best with this pronunciation. I'm learning Japanese at the moment, and it could be better, I know. But interesting story, actually, with the Majima storyline, while I'm talking about it. So like I say, it's based on a real-life place, Dotonbori. And that's where, if you're familiar with the legend of the Colonel, or the curse of the Colonel, that's where that happens. There was a moment in the game where Majima goes down under the river, and I see a statue. It's like that you'd see outside of restaurants. And my brain clicked. I was like, wait, a statue in a river? Is this a reference to the Curse of the Colonel? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Maybe it's just signifying that this river is dirty and polluted and people throw stuff in there. But in brief, I mean, I'll probably link it somewhere. The Curse of the Colonel is, years ago, there was a baseball team and they were doing really well, and they were throwing things into the river as like a celebration and like trying to give good luck, trying to throw effigies. But there was one Caucasian player. Now, obviously, in this part of the world, that's the minority. And whilst they could make effigies of the other ones, they didn't have anything that suited. But there was a KFC nearby. And they threw a Colonel Sanders statue into the river, and weirdly their luck changed for the worse. Now, people who aren't, obsessed with curses and think that everything must be fated have looked at it and said, well, actually, if you look statistically, it's not that weird that they suddenly took a downturn. There are various factors that could have caused that. But it's nice to think there's a supernatural element in play. And it also excuses the players a little, maybe. But I feel that this was a reference to that, and I love that for it. But the plot of this, like I say, is what kept me going. We have this plot of land that's owned by Makimura Makoto, even though she doesn't know it because it was gifted by her grandfather. And she's being hunted down on Majima's side to be killed. He's been assigned to take her out. But we learn that she's blind because she was tortured by other gangs. And it's not a physical blindness. She wasn't tortured in that way. It's just the damage to her psyche has made her just not want to see at all. And she goes through this whole thing of realising who she is. She realises that this guy who took in Kiryu is actually her brother as well. So there's a family connection there, which is why he's trying to get hold of her, because he wants to protect his sister, but also to meet her because they were separated. And there's a very beautiful tale there, because obviously Kiryu is an orphan and stuff like that. This idea of family, being so important, because the family that he's been able to make over the years is important to him. And as we learn in Yakuza, the circumstances of him being an orphan are actually caused by the guy who's in charge of him. This whole story coming together and her realising that, oh, wait, you all want this? Fine. I will get rid of it in a way that screws everyone over, and she takes control. Although she also loses her brother. But towards the end, her sight is coming back. She can see vague shapes, and it's very beautiful. Now, like I say, I'd never played the original that much. So I never really got a handle on Majima Goro as a character. It never came up that much. So I didn't know that he was this really kind of crazy, over-the-top guy. So my first real introduction to Majima Goro was the Lord of the Night. A very calm, cool, collected guy who I really kind of empathised with. I felt strongly, or more strongly for him than I did for Kiryu. But now I know why that character was adopted, it's even better. When I finally got round to Kiwami, which I may talk about down the line, it was beautiful to see this caricature of a man that he'd become. Because towards the end, her sight is coming back, but it's only vague shapes. She doesn't know what he looks like. And he realises that I can't make a life with her. So I'm going to lean into this Yakuza thing. Now they've welcomed me back, I'm going to lean into it heavily. And that caricature is born. But he does meet up with Makimura Makoto at one point and basically saves her from a sleazy guy. But she doesn't recognise him. And he doesn't let her know. I felt that was a very beautiful moment. He could have been like, hey, it's me, the guy who looked after you all that time. But no, I'm going to let you live your life and actually have proper happiness in a normal life, not whatever I've got going on. Very much a sacrifice, and even though playing through Yakuza Kiwami, it bugged me, it really annoyed me when it constantly popped up and was attacking you and saying like, hey, you got to be the best version of you and all that kind of stuff. As annoying as it was, I still remembered the character he was, and that this was all an act. So if you've never played any of the Yakuza games, but you're interested, I'd say start with this one. Whilst it can be a bit complex, having to go 2 chapters on one, 2 chapters on another, it can get a bit tiring on the brain. There are recaps that you can have. Now, I do have to warn you as well, because some people find it difficult to really sort of get engaged with something if the subtitles. If it's just because you can't be bothered, I have no sympathy. But if you really have trouble focusing when the audio and words are different, you might need to skip it because it is Japanese audio only. Now, because I'm learning Japanese, I could take it as, exercise for my brain, but it may be a challenge for some, so I totally understand if that's too much for you. But yeah, I really enjoyed my time with it. I'm sad I sat on it for as long as I did, but at least it wasn't 5 years or more. Next time, we're going to have something very special. It's a Christmas special, technically, because it's actually going to be on Christmas Day, weirdly. Haven't done that for a while. And I have a special guest, and we're going to talk about a special Christmas film. So I hope you'll join me for that, but until then, as always, thank you for watching, and take care.